Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today, we're going to talk about the Velveteen Dream and his sit down with Chris Van Vliet. It was a 1 hour and some change affair. Not bad. It was actually pretty good. He explained as much as he could. And you know what? There was a little bit of suspicion, I think, dumped on this. I was actually more pro Velveteen Dream than before I saw this interview. But I think that he explained a lot of it in really good detail, going through it, trying to explain what was going on at the time, etc., etc. And I still don't know whether it occurred or not, but he finally got that this guy speaks for himself. So I'm not going to go through the entire interview. I'm just going to hit some of the important points. Now, some of the important points is what took so long. Well, he said that, his process took him 3 years. He had to take time away from wrestling. He had to leave the environment that he was in because it wasn't just that he was accused of being a pedo and all this kind of stuff. It was also that he was doing drugs. And he tells the story later about the EC3 story. And which is probably my favorite story in this whole thing. So EC3 told the story on a podcast with Vince Russo that Velveteen Dream has set up his phone horizontally to record people in the bathroom during a party at EC3's house. Now, I immediately was like, there's no way this can be true because EC3 did not beat the crap out of Velveteen Dream. EC3 should have gotten fired for breaking his foot in Velveteen Dream's ass. If that was true. If it was true, there would have had to be some kind of altercation. Also, other people would have saw it. Probably would have said something. So, Velveteen Dream, at the time, responded and says, what were we doing in that bathroom? And it was kind of like, what? Like, what were they doing in the bathroom? Ugh. But in the Chris Van Vliet interview, he explained that it was EC3, himself, some other people. They went back to EC3's house where EC3 had a picture of Tom Selleck and he put some cocaine on the picture of Tom Selleck and they were doing cocaine at EC3's house. And that he must have left his phone in the bathroom while they were doing cocaine at EC3's house. Now, this is a part where I was like, that makes sense, right? That makes absolute sense that, everybody's in the house doing coke. Coke does make you paranoid. So perhaps he did see a phone in the bathroom and thought, oh my God, they're trying to record me. Who knows? EC3, of course, has long since denied that he ever did drugs. Velveteen Dream says it took him years to admit that he had a problem. It's going to take EC3 a while to admit that he's got a problem. And he knows that EC3 still follow him on Instagram or Twitter or something like that. And he says, why would the guy follow me if he thinking that I recorded him? Why does he still follow me? Why does he still interact with me? And I thought, that's another good point. Now, the cocaine on the picture of Tom Selleck, I believe that one, brother. I believe that. If somebody says, well, look, we was in the house doing drugs, man, shit happens. I believe it. I'll buy that one. Because having been around people who party, you leave stuff anywhere when you partying. When you drunk, when you high, when you coked up, whatever. You lose things like keys and phones and all this stuff just kind of, it goes wherever. Especially if you're in a safe place. You at a coworker's or a colleague's house. Of course, this kind of stuff would happen. And of course, this was before he was fired from NXT. So EC3 held on to that story for years, by the way. Before telling the story, I think it was in 2022 when he first started telling that story. So I don't really believe EC3's version of events. But this is Velveteen Dream trying to actually air out all of the things. And he's saying that, hey, the EC3 thing was never true. We were in there doing cocaine. Maybe I left my phone in the bathroom or whatever. But I was not trying to record him. He never said anything to me about it, blah, 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 blah. And then the first time I ever heard it was the podcast. And I was like, man, that makes a lot of sense to me. And as long as your story makes sense, I can't hate you. All right. Now, when the story stopped making sense, that's when I'm like, But Velveteen Dream has had issues with drugs. He's been arrested for possession of cocaine before. He admitted that when he bit the guy at the gym. He admitted to biting the guy, apologized to the guy in the interview. So it seems to be a guy who finally is ready to release all of the tension that he had in his life. So let's get to the pedophile allegations. Now, apparently there were multiple pedophile allegations. I thought it was just one, but apparently it was two. And he says that he didn't mention anything about them before because he thought common sense would have cleared most of this stuff up. But common sense is not so common. At the time, however, he did deny the allegations in 2020. He did deny them. He denied them on Twitter publicly. But people did not believe it because there were videos and there was a voice. They used his voice. Now, that was the part that I was like, how did they get his voice? How did they get the pictures? Those two things are actually very interesting questions. How did he get his voice? How did he get the pictures? So, first starters, when they started this portion, which was the biggest portion of the interview, he denied having any inappropriate conversations, consensual or otherwise, with any minors. He said that the images were doctored and that the messages between him and the supposed underage boys were also doctored. Now, he did say that he was a mentor. He talked about how much he loved wrestling. Earlier in the interview, before we got to this part, he talked about being Patrick Clark from Tough Enough, who was a message board super fan, who cared so much about wrestling and wanted to know so much about wrestling, and saw an opportunity once he became a WWE superstar to help other people get to that point. Now, later in the interview, he talks about how he started wrestling very young and that people took an interest in him when he was wrestling and helped him along. And so he was able to sign a WWE contract at 19 and live his dream. Again, people forget how young this guy is. He was Velveteen Dream at 21. All right. That's crazy. He was very young. So he says, I was trying to find other people who were like me, who loved the business and who I could help bring them along. And both of his accusers were apparently those kinds of boys. One of the boys is Canadian. Velveteen Dream admitted to calling the boy on Instagram, but said he never typed or said anything to this boy that was inappropriate, and that it was a big brother, little brother kind of relationship, and he was trying to help him become a wrestler. So apparently that's where they got his voice. They recorded his voice by when he was talking to this boy. And they apparently have, he claims that they edited parts of what he said out and kept the "what school do you go to" part, which is what the part that everybody heard and is very, very creepy. But he says that he did not do that. Now, the interesting thing here is we cannot prove that the rest of this conversation exists. You say like they doctored the audio. Okay, do you have the original audio? Because we don't know otherwise, right? If you say that they deviously edited this, I can believe that, but I don't understand where the rest of the audio went. Now, if you say the only people who was recording it are the people who got to make the allegations, well, that's just unfortunate. I'm willing to buy that somebody doctors your audio or cuts you out of context. I'm willing to believe that. But at the same time, yeah, you probably shouldn't have, been contacting some underage boy, even if you was trying to be a mentor to him. But I understand the process. And again, this is one of those things where you have to realize how young Velveteen Dream is. And he's not thinking about this kind of stuff. And he even mentions that he became successful so young that to him, he was still very immature. All the stuff that he was experiencing, his ego had gotten out of control and all this other stuff. He was not thinking that this kind of thing could occur. So that was the first case. He did admit to calling the boy, said he was trying to help him. For some odd reason, Velveteen Dream mentioned that the Velveteen Dream character in the WWE 2K20 video game is a mentor, and that's his storyline in the video game. And I was just thinking, like, what did I got to do with this situation? Like, that ain't got nothing to do with this situation. All right. It's nice that you was able to bring that up because it kind of makes it sound like that's where you got this story from. But okay, if you say so. But that was the one of the cases. The other case is similar. He was trying to help the boy who wanted to be a wrestler. Now, this would be the most famous accuser because he wrote the manifesto during the Speaking Out engagement of 2020. Now, at the very beginning, because Chris Van Vliet wanted to know where did they get the pictures of Velveteen Dream. And Velveteen Dream mentioned, hey, during those eras, there was a lot of new leaks happening. And it's possible that somebody could have leaked some photos of me on, the internet, and I didn't know it or whatever. At the time, he did say that he did confirm that it was a photo of him, that it was a real photo, but said that he didn't know where they got it from, and that it perhaps had been leaked. This is what he said 4 years ago at the time. All right. So he did say that at the time. So he confirmed that the photo was him and that the photo was being shared without his consent and that he was going to look into it. So he basically says, hey, you guys remember when there was a bunch of leaks back in the day? And I do remember that. It was called the fappening, wasn't it? I looked it up. That's how I remembered it. But it was a bunch of women. Like, most of the people paid attention to women that was being, their news was being out there, like Tony Storm and Charlotte and a bunch of other people, right? Nobody paid attention to the men. So I was like, okay, when I heard that, I was like, it's possible that there were several men who had their stuff leaked and nobody paid attention to it. Is that possible? Well, for the first time in my life, I looked. I couldn't find anything that said that Velveteen Dream was part of this situation. Of course, this almost dragged me down the rabbit hole of, Matt Riddle's dong and Seth Rollins' dong, and thank God I didn't click any of that stuff. But it was basically just a list of all the men whose stuff had been leaked over the time, and I didn't see Velveteen Dream's name on it. Now, is it possible that they got this picture from somebody else? Sure. Is it possible they got it from like a social media account that he doesn't use anymore? It's possible. Is it possible they got it from some kind of dating site and they saved it? It's possible. So we don't know where they got the picture from. He said he didn't send it to them and that it was edited in a way to make it seem like he had sent it to them. Okay, so that's plausible. Now, the conversation that he supposedly had with the Twitter accuser, the one who everybody knows. Now, this kid posted up a conversation that the kid had with Velveteen Dream. And Velveteen Dream said that this was on Facebook Messenger. But the kid told everybody that these were texts, that they had a personal text back and forth between the two of them. And as these were personal texts, it made it seem like the kid had Velveteen Dream's phone number. So Velveteen Dream says, I very publicly had tweeted at him to call me back. So that let people know that this kid does have a personal connection to Velveteen Dream. Now, Velveteen Dream says this was another situation where he was mentoring a young wrestler, and they had gotten into a disagreement. Now, apparently this young wrestler, who goes by the name Joshua Fuller, I don't remember what his wrestling name is or anything like that. But this kid apparently was being trained by one of Velveteen Dream's former trainers, a guy by the name of Brandon Green. So apparently this Brandon Green, who had trained Velveteen Dream, was now training Josh Fuller. And that's how the two of them met. And at that point, Velveteen Dream did what he said he's always going to do. And that is he took this kid under his wing and tried to train him. Now, apparently, they're 3 years apart in age. And that the conversation that they had was in May 2016 when Josh Fuller was 16 years old and Velveteen Dream was 19. Now, here's an interesting piece of business here, because there are, at some point in life, I don't quite know how these things work, but I know they do exist, are called Romeo and Juliet laws, where if a minor is, in a dating situation with somebody who's over the age of 18, that could still be legal in some situations. I don't know if that applies here, but Velveteen Dream says it wasn't sexual anyway, that they were talking about wrestling and he was trying to help the kid become a better wrestler. Now, in 2018, apparently, this kid suffered a couple of concussions, and this is where they had a falling out because Velveteen Dream suggested that the kid stop wrestling. He was getting hurt. He didn't really know what he was doing. He probably needed more training or whatever the case may be. The kid got offended that Velveteen Dream was telling him to stop. The kid wouldn't stop, so Velveteen Dream decided to cut him off. He was not going to help him anymore. Now, from Velveteen Dream's perspective, if I'm advising you and I'm your mentor and I'm saying this is a bad idea, you shouldn't do this, it's incumbent upon you to listen to me and take my advice. If at any point you decide you're not going to take my advice, I'm going to leave you alone. And apparently that was the situation that was occurring here. Is that in 2018, so that means Joshua Fuller would have been 18 years old or 17 or something to that effect. Velveteen Dream would have been 21, which means he would have been Velveteen Dream on television at this point. Was telling this young man, you're getting hurt, you got 2 concussions, I think he said in a short amount of time, maybe you should chill, and not wrestle anymore. The kid chooses to continue. Velveteen Dream said, well, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm not going to mentor you anymore. I don't want to talk to you. So apparently they were playing phone tag as they were trying to, bridge this relationship or whatever was going on at the time. And in 2020, this is 4 years after they met, which means Joshua Fuller is now 19, 20, 21, and Velveteen Dream is like 23, 24. And he comes out and says that Velveteen Dream was trying to groom him. Now, they actually, at the time, and I remember talking about this in my videos, I have a playlist. I ended up being the Velveteen Dream guy for a short amount of time. I don't understand why. But in the manifesto that Josh Fuller put out there, he said in clear fucking English that Velveteen Dream was never directly sexual with him. And that it was only after talking to other people that he felt like he was being groomed, which is almost the exact same thing that you hear from like young college girls who, she had sex with some boy, but he didn't call her back or whatever the case may be. And now all of a sudden she feels like she's been raped. And, in this situation, this guy who says Velveteen Dream was supposed to help me, he stopped helping me. So fuck him. And that's basically the situation that Velveteen Dream is trying to set up here, that this was revenge. He stopped helping the kid, and the kid decided to turn on him. Now, the interesting bit about this is that he admitted that he could not explain how they got the picture. He had the theory that it was a leak. I'm positing the idea that perhaps he posted it somewhere else and it got stolen, or, whatever the case may be. But not having an explanation of how they got the picture actually makes sense to me. Because when you're a public person and you're constantly posting pictures and stuff like this, you do lose track of where you put things, which is why I don't post pictures of myself or anything like that online, right? Because you never know who's looking, and you never know what they're going to do with pictures that you've posted publicly. So is it possible that he posted this picture publicly, probably didn't think about it, wasn't paying attention? Yes. Is it also possible that he sent the picture to the kid and now is just lying about it? Yes. But I tend to believe that he did not send the kid the picture. I tend to believe that. Now, we talk about the Discord server, where apparently there were people who supposedly were listening to Velveteen Dream sexed with a young underage boy in the Discord. They supposedly had the audio evidence and all this kind of stuff, but that stuff never emerged, which he noted, and I think is a really good point and something that really should be noted. If they recorded him being inappropriate with a young boy, why didn't they put it out there? You had a smoking gun at that point. Why didn't they put it out there? He also said that, WWE, upon seeing this stuff, did investigate. Triple H put his own reputation on the line. by going out publicly and saying that they looked at these investigations of what happened with Velveteen Dream. They found nothing. So he's saying that people who are calling him a pedophile, calling him a groomer and all this kind of stuff, it's false. There have been no evidence that has shown up. He has never been arrested. He's never been charged. He's been investigated and nobody found anything. There's never been any hard evidence that he couldn't, hand wave and explain away to tie him to this situation, where I think that while it's nice that we got his story out there, I don't think he cleared things up completely. Again, he couldn't explain where they got the picture from. The idea that, oh yeah, I was having conversations with them, but I was being a big brother, I was being a mentor. It's like, that's believable if you were significantly older, but you're like 2 or 3 years older than these guys, like I never saw a mentor program. Y'all basically peers at that point. I never saw a mentor program where that small of a gap. Usually if somebody's a mentor, they're a gray beard, you're a young buck, and it's that kind of situation. It's like Unc, and his little homie. Not a situation like I'm 16, you're 19. It's like, I've only seen that shit in the hood, and that only ends up with, the 16-year-olds trying to steal Cadillac converters. I've never seen that happen in a way that makes any good sense. I mean, every time I saw a teenager try to mentor somebody, it's towards something negative. Unless they're trying to talk to a really small child. Like, if you're 19, you can mentor like a 10-year-old. That might be great. But a 16-year-old, y'all are peers. And I get how he may have seen himself as a leader, because he did admit that he had a huge ego at the time. He did admit that he was kind of a prodigy. He had gotten into the business really young. He signed to WWE at 19. He was already on TV at 21. By the time all of this stuff is going on, he's been Velveteen Dream for 3 or 4 years. Everybody's blowing smoke up his ass about how he's a superstar and how he's going to main event WrestleMania and all this kind of stuff. So he starts believing in his own hype. It's possible. It's not completely improbable that he did see himself as a leader of men, and I'm going to help some of these young guys get into the business just like other people helped me. It's entirely possible. But to me, that's probably the shakiest way to explain why you were having conversations with young people. But if the conversations were not sexual, but were edited to look sexual, which is what he's saying, then I understand. If he asking you what school do you go to, he was saying, I'm talking about wrestling school, because he knows where all these wrestling schools are and what wrestling school are you going to. He's asking you questions and you are going to edit his voice in a way that makes it sound pedophilic. Very, very odd. But like I said, this is the shakiest part of his story, is that I'm not 100% sold on 19-year-old mentor, 16-year-old student. Like, I'm just not entirely sold on that one. If he'd have been 23, 24, maybe. But 19? I don't know. Yes, you are where this kid wants to be. I understand that. And sometimes that's good enough. But I definitely, if he was a little bit older, I probably would have understood it a little bit more. But not your peers at that point, brother. So it all made a lot of sense. At the end, he said that the Velveteen Dream may be over, but the dream isn't over. And he's enjoying his life without pro wrestling. And, maybe one day he'll get back in, but he doesn't see himself going back to WWE. And WWE owns the Velveteen Dream. So he'll probably never be Velveteen Dream again. Which makes sense. And is probably correct, if we're being honest. But I have always been on the side of innocent until proven guilty. Most people, when they're in a jam, it's because they can't cleanly break themselves from the accusation. If you're accused of killing somebody and you were there, like your footprint is in the blood, that's enough for most people to be like, well, you were there. How do you easily separate yourself from the murder? The easiest way is to say, I wasn't there, and then nobody can prove that you were there. In this situation, they can prove that Velveteen Dream was talking to underage boys. We don't know what the fuck they were talking about. He could be lying about what they're talking about. The boys could be lying about what they were talking about, but he's admitting that he was having conversations through social media with underage boys. So now he cannot cleanly break himself away from the accusation. So that means he really didn't clear anything up in this interview. The only way to really clear this thing up would have been to say, I never had any conversation with any youths on the phone. Never had any conversation with any youths on Twitter at all. But since you did, because you saying like, hey, I was being a mentor, well, now you can't cleanly separate yourself from that instance. It's the same thing with like rape cases, right? In a rape case, if you had sex with the girl, you cannot prove that you didn't rape her. If you say, well, it was consensual, well, of course that's what you're going to say. You're rapist. You know, we were both drunk. That's of course you were, you rapist. You can't get away from it at that point. If an accusation is made, the only way in modern society for you to be able to get away from that would be for you to be able to cleanly say, I was not there. You can't prove I was there. There was a Buffalo Bills quarterback or kicker or something recently who the only way people would believe that he did not rape that girl in college is because he was not even on the premises when she was raped. That was the only way people would believe that he didn't do it, because that's the kind of society that we live in now. They don't need evidence. They forget the idea that, you know, and most people did forget that Triple H went on publicly and said that we didn't find anything when it comes to Velveteen Dream talking to underage kids and stuff like this. People forgot that that even happened. I remember at the time people were saying, well, of course WWE is going to cover for him. They want him to be a superstar, you know? And he said like there was, he read a list of like famous Hollywood actors or whatever that was accused of like rape and pedophilia and everything. I don't know what that had to do with anything, but that was very theatrical, by the way. I don't know what that was about. But he's basically saying, look at these very, very famous people who got busted. Kobe Bryant, one of the people he mentioned, actually went to trial. Why would WWE put their reputation on the line for a guy in NXT? Which is the question I asked when people were talking like, you know, WWE's going to just cover it up. It was more believable when people say Vince McMahon covered up the murder for Superfly Jimmy Snuka. That's more believable. Because at least you could say Superfly Jimmy Snuka was a very important wrestler at the time for the WWF. Because he was one of the top draws. When people say Vince McMahon covered up the Ring Boy scandal, it's like, well, okay, that's kind of believable because his best friend is Pat Patterson. Pat Patterson was on the creative team. He's the guy that created the Royal Rumble. Very important guy to the history of WWE. Okay, I can see how Vince might want to cover up the Ring Boy scandal. Has nothing to do with the other guys like the Mel Phillips, you know, that weirdo. Like, why would Vince cover for that guy? You know, like you running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Why would you cover up for a guy like Mel Phillips? Now, maybe your best friend, maybe, but Mel Phillips, nah. So the idea that there was a cover-up to protect a guy from NXT who was all of like 24 years old, had not made it to the main roster, never wrestled on the main roster, was not making you tons of money in merchandise or anything like that. Why would Triple H sacrifice his reputation, the reputation of the company, for Velveteen Dream? That's a great argument. Because he really could have just saved himself some trouble and cut him. Now, I appreciate that Velveteen Dream said that. He appreciated Shawn Michaels and Triple H for going through this thing with him. And they took a lot of slings and arrows, and so many other people did too, by trying to take his side, I guess you could say, or being fair to him during that time. But I don't think he did himself a lot of favors here. I'm glad that he spoke up finally. And one of the things that he said is what took him so long is he was waiting for somebody to save him. He was waiting for other people to step in and say he was a good guy. He was waiting for other people to step in and vouch for him, and found out that those people were not coming. The only person who could defend him was him. And that was the impetus for him doing this interview. And I really appreciate that he brought all of this stuff with him. All of the texts, all of the tweets, you know, the accusations. He brought all of that stuff. And him and Chris Van Vliet went through it. They read the stuff. He explained what he needed to explain. And I think he did his best to dispute these really terrible accusations. But he couldn't clearly break himself from it. This was an opportunity for him to say, they can't even prove I know this guy. But he told the truth. I was having conversations with him. I know him. But we don't know what the nature of those, we as observers don't know what the nature of those conversations were. But I can tell you this. If you're 16 years old and you got a 19-year-old girlfriend or boyfriend, in most places, you're probably not going to go to jail. You know, I can tell you that. You're probably not going to go to jail. The idea of grooming is like for you to be like some kind of super adult. Like for you to be like 38, dating like a 16, 17-year-old, or, 28, let's say 28, and you're dating like a 16-year-old girl. Yeah, and you could probably say you're grooming at that point. But 19 and 16, that's not that much of an age difference if we really think about it. But what do you guys think? I'm always being the guy who's everybody says you're the Velveteen Dream defender. I just ask pertinent questions. I'm asking pertinent questions of this situation right now. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later.
MagMongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, Daddy.